Can the President of the United States take America to war? Does the President of the United States have an obligation to defend America? And does he have the authorization to act in that capacity, even if it takes us to war? These are not academic questions. These are things that have tremendous relevance right now. Now, I'm sure, as most of you are now aware, 3 American soldiers were killed in action over the weekend at a small, tiny outcropping of a post in Jordan, just across the Syrian border. Now, many times you've heard us talk about this. If you've watched our channel at all, you've known how we talk about how that does not secure America's interest. It was not necessary. And I don't want to talk about that at the moment, but do tune in today at 12:30. We actually have a show dedicated to that very prospect and what the U.S. should do now in terms of policy. But right now, I want to talk about something that I think is more urgent and needs to be understood right now, as people are starting to already talk about what the U.S. should do in retaliation for this. Now, I'll just tell you, as someone who served in America for over 2 decades in uniform, went to 4 different combat deployments. I've known men who've died in action in combat. I've seen it myself a lot close and up front. I have great heartfelt concern and anguish for the family members of those people who have died. And I can assure you there is no bigger advocate than anyone that if an American troop is killed by a hostile force, those perpetrators must die. Period. Full stop. No questions about it. There is no debate about it. If you kill an American, you're going to die. That's an obligation for the President of the United States to take care of our people. Now, right along with that, though, concurrent and not instead of, but simultaneously, the president also has an obligation not to cause more harm. He has an obligation not to suck us into a war that we should never fight and that would never benefit our needs. So let's look actually at what the president can do and what he should do and what he can't do according to U.S. law. Now, let me bring you up to date a little bit about what's going on and what some people are saying out there, and actually a lot of people. I'm going to show you a clip from General Kellogg, who was the former national security advisor for vice president in the Trump administration. Here's what he said, and this is very common, which I've seen on nearly every channel talking about what the U.S. should do now.
They have to do what I would call super escalate. They have to take it to a level that everybody's uncomfortable, including those in the Situation Room, where you go to a level you say, okay, this isn't a gamble. It's a risk, and we understand the risks involved. But until we make a clear message and we send a clear message, these are going to continue. So you have to go outside of your normal box, and you have to break the escalation ladder. Either attack the Quds Force leaders, that's Ismail Ghani, or the Supreme Leader Khamenei, or the facilities they've got in Iran, but somebody has to make a hard call, because now we've reached a point where we're going to have to do something very hard, very strong, and the response is going to be probably, but from their end, it could be proportionate. So be prepared for that.
Be prepared for that. Be prepared for a response. He just said, I don't know if you were tracking the details of what he just said. He said hit the Quds Force, which is basically their military, or their supreme leader, which is their head of state. By any definition, folks, that's an act of war. And that they would respond. They would respond the way most nations did. If you attack their head of state, you probably have a war on your hands, not a retaliation, not a response, but a war. Now, President Biden said also yesterday, when asked about this, he said that he's going to respond when he's ready. Here's what he said.
I want to point out that we had a tough day last night in the Middle East. We lost 3 brave souls in an attack on one of our bases. Yes. And I've asked for a moment of silence for all 3 of those fallen soldiers. Jeez. And we shall respond.
Now, here's what worries me, because that's as far as he went on that. He didn't say how we're going to respond. He didn't go into detail like General Kellogg did about suggesting what they may do. He just said we'll respond. What worries me is because I believe it was last October on a 60 Minutes program, the president was asked whether the U.S. can do 2 things at one time with helping helping Ukraine at the same time they're helping Israel in their war. And his response is a little concerning. Let's see if you can pick it out.
We're the United States of America, for God's sake.
The most powerful nation in the history, not in the world, in the history of the world. The history of the world.
Coming after a long line of presidents, and I mean a long line of presidents basically thinking that they're above the law, that they don't have to worry about the Constitution or the U.S. law, they can do whatever they want because, as he said, and I've heard nearly every president say this, we're the most powerful nation on the planet of the earth, in the history of the earth. He's not the first one that said that. That concerns me because that mentality seems to think I can do whatever I want and there won't be any consequences because I'm the most powerful, so they can't do anything. Now, let me just explain to you, and let me show you in graphic detail, you don't have unlimited power. Our Constitution was made up so that you don't have unilateral power to do that. In fact, the Constitution puts war-making capacity exclusive in the realm of the United States Congress. In 1968, there was also passed the War Powers Resolution to make it a little bit more explicit. And that's what you see before you right now. And a couple of key things I want to point out here, because very often people misconstrue this law to say that the president can do whatever he wants for 60 days as long as he reports to Congress. And that's a bad misreading. That is not what the law says. I'm showing you now graphically what the law does say. It says there are only 3 cases in which the president of the United States can exercise the use of lethal power. One is that it's only if there's a declaration of war by Congress, ergo from the Constitution. 2 is a specific statutory authorization, like the authorized use for military force from the Congress, again, or that there's been a national emergency created by an attack upon the United States, its territories, or its armed forces. Now, you may think, okay, yep, American forces were attacked, so now he can authorize. He is authorized to attack whoever did it, not just Iran because he thinks that maybe they were also behind it. That means, like, according to the CENTCOM, the Central Command, it was probably Kataib Hezbollah. And in fact, the Islamic resistance of Iran actually claimed the justification for that. They said they did it. So he's authorized to go after those people who actually perpetrated it. He is not authorized to go after Iran, especially, as General Kellogg very much accurately said, that could spawn a war. Now, Gary, if you could pull that back up there, I want to read one other part there, because it says that the president in every possible instance shall consult with Congress before introducing United States armed forces into hostilities or into situations of imminent involvement in hostilities, which is clearly defined by the circumstances, and go on to say after that. So before President Biden can take action, he has to get authorization from Congress pursuant to the first part of that law and the U.S. Constitution. Now, because this has been abused so badly over time, people now seem to think that the president can do whatever he wants. And in fact, that's how it happened. And look, Congress is their own worst enemy here, because depending on what party the president is in power at any given time, his supporters in Congress usually say, yeah, he can do what he wants. And they give him political cover to violate the very Constitution they all swore an oath to uphold. It's a second issue. We'll touch on that at a different time. But look, as far as America is concerned, Biden cannot just go and attack Iran. He cannot do what Biden said on his own authority, because that could suck us into a war. And look, if you think that I'm misreading this, if you think that no, you're just reading it the wrong way, let me tell you who actually said this, and I think the most eloquent way possible. And in fact, I'll put this up here right now as someone who should tell President Biden exactly what the law says.
Presidential notification of Congress about the need to exercise war powers cannot be satisfied in 280 characters or less. Mr. President, you have to explain your decision and your strategy to the American people. Democracy runs on accountability, and nowhere is it more important than the power to make war and bring peace. You're required to work with Congress, Mr. President. You're required to abide by the War Powers Resolution, Mr. President. And you cannot pursue war with Iran without consent and authority from Congress.
Man, I could not have put it better myself, candidate Biden. Thank you, President Biden. Can you listen to yourself? Because you had it spot on in 2020. Now, in that case, he was then a candidate who was talking to a president, then Trump, who had just assassinated an Iranian leader, and there was a potential that we could go to war. and we can touch on this another base, but Iran retaliated after that and attacked an American base, an al-Assad air base in Iraq. 100 Americans were wounded. Thank God none were killed. And at least Trump gets a little bit of credit then that he did not continue to retaliate and escalate and went up the ladder, which could have drawn us into a war then. I was really concerned about it then and was very grateful that he didn't escalate beyond. A lot of people wanted him to. A lot of people, these same people were saying, yeah, that's what you should do. But he decided not to. He chose to take the better path and just let that go down. But the problem is that never ended for Iran. They have continued to attack our bases throughout it. It has seen a sharp escalation ever since by the Iran-backed groups in the region, ever since Israel attacked into the Gaza Strip in mid-October. But it was been going on even through the years there. They just hadn't been successful. Now they have been. So then now that we have the question, and we've already addressed this before, and we're going to touch on it this afternoon again about what the policy should be. But folks, right now, let's lay down a marker that is black and white, as clear as can be, as authoritative as the United States Constitution and the U.S. law. President Biden himself cannot legally take us to war. He cannot take these kinds of actions against Iran that Kellogg and several other people are advocating without first full authorization from Iran, from the Congress. That means from the American people. You have to be able to say through your representatives, yes, Mr. President, we want to go to war with another country, or we think that's the right answer. Of course, I don't. I think that's a terrible thing. We need to withdraw our troops from there to get them out of pointless harm's way so we don't get dragged into a war that will see even more Americans die. That's how absurd and brilliantly awful this is to suggest that we do those things, which almost certainly will have a counter response, which will get more Americans killed. But they don't want to talk about that. But what I want to make sure is that before any action takes place, that you get to have your say. Now, if you want to join Kellogg and all this, that's your constitutional right. You can make your voice known. But if you're like me, and I think most Americans, we don't want another Middle East war. We want to prevent those. We want to lessen our strategic vulnerability. We don't want to take actions that can actually exacerbate it, and especially if it's done in a way that violates United States law. Because listen to me, black and white, no matter what anyone's opinion is, if Biden does these things in the absence of any kind of direct relation that Iran did those things, did kill those Americans, that he is violating American law if he takes us into a situation which could draw us into war without first getting concurrence from the United States Congress. That's what you need to understand. And I hope that you'll do, as some of our guests on previous shows have said, make your voice known. Write your congressman, call your congressman, go and protest out in front of his office if you feel strongly enough about it. You do whatever it is, but let's don't get sucked into a war unless we at least follow our Constitution and the American people actually say that's what they want. I don't think they will, but we'll see what happens. Join us at 11 o'clock because we're going to have Doug McGregor on today. And he's always an entertaining guest. He's always got some great insights. And I'm sure we're going to talk about this subject as well. There's some things going on in the Ukraine-Russia war. And we're going to be back on at 12:30, where I'm going to talk specifically about the policies that we should do in withdrawing from both Iraq and Syria and how that's going to help us, how that's going to make us stronger. And it's not going to make us weaker, as some people inaccurately claim. So we will see you next time on Daniel Davis Deep Dive this afternoon. And by all means, like and subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode here in just a few hours.